Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of SDRescue. I am Austin Fuller, and I'm joined once again by my co-host and copywriter expert, Grayson Fulbright. Grayson, how are things going?
Going well. I'm really excited today. This is an email that I think has a lot of unique things that we don't often get to talk about, and they're not necessarily great practices, but it does give us an opportunity to kind of dive into different aspects of email messaging today. So we'll be going through kind of a longer email that is what I would consider to be more standard, where there's not necessarily something wrong with it, but I definitely don't think that it would actually go to convert. So we'll be looking at a rewrite that I wrote up today, and then kind of going into some tips on how, with kind of the same sort of copy and the same sort of framework, you can adjust the flow of the email and the focus of the email to make a much bigger difference in terms of what the words are doing.
Yeah, and for me, when I read it, the coaching points that I would give as a sales leader to a sales rep or an SDR sending this type of email are a couple of things. One, this is actually interesting because it's coming from a founder, so that'll be really cool to see the email from, what happens when the disconnect between us as salespeople or founders or people in our business reaching out to other people and connecting ideas for them, as opposed to what happens in this email. Instead of connecting ideas and helping them understand how they get from their current state to future state, they assume that connection is already there. And that's often a trap we fall into in outreach, is we preload our context into our emails, which obviously when the recipient reads it, that context does not exist for them. And so it creates a disconnect. So we can jump into the email as soon as I find the share screen button and click on it. And of course, we will zoom in to 150% because I don't like to squint. So here we go. Good morning, Austin. My name is CEO and co-founder of this company. 2020 was a year where many game rules were changed, and it's important to adjust business plans accordingly for 2021 to grow and become stronger. I'm contacting you because I thought Viking Cloud might be looking to enhance their development team with offshore developers. We are a software factory in Miami, but with our development team based in Argentina, which allows us to offer services for a much competitive cost. We have worked with dozens of clients in agile software development projects, including other software companies in the US, such as Jackrabbit Mobile in Austin, Wonglear in California, or Really in Miami. For the past 12 years, we have been helping our clients understand, design, and create digital products that are right for their business and or clients. If you think this could be of interest for you, I would love to discuss the opportunities Viking Cloud might have in this space. Can we schedule a call? I look forward to hearing back from you. Okay, jumping into color codes. So I'm going to just start off where I started with the idea thing. There's a couple of ideas here. So the first idea is about 2020 and game rules changing and for adjusting business plans accordingly. And I just want to say that for somebody who is an outsourced development vendor, it would make sense in your own head as you write this email that what you mean is using an outsourced vendor gives you the ability to respond quicker to changes in the market or your customer base and develop software faster, become more agile, if you want to use a buzzword. However, they don't write that here. And for me, as a cybersecurity managed services provider, agility and responding to changes in 2020 may be completely different, right? It may not actually have anything to do with how we conduct business. So that's the first place I wanted to highlight where there's a disconnect between the framework, the idea, the context they're putting around this email, and the disconnect for where the prospect is, because there might not be the same context that the sender has for the recipient.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall, to kind of add to your point, I think not only did they kind of put too much contextual stuff that can turn out to be risky assumptions. I don't want to say that all of these are risky, but the more you add and the further you go, the bigger the chance that you're going to disconnect with somebody. But on top of that too, I feel like they also kind of long-winded it a bit. And you kind of see this in sales messaging where they don't really understand how to refine their pitch or kind of personalize their pitch to who they're talking to. And so what started to me as a decent email, I mean, I think that the vision state of kind of growing and becoming stronger was very vague and a little ambiguous, but not a problem. I thought overall saying, hey, good morning, Austin. My name is so-and-so. I'm the founder of this company, and opening with a story. That's something I do often. But to touch on your point, I 100% agree that it all fell apart from there. Not only did they kind of go into this rambling scenario where they started just like going through sentences and sentences in a single paragraph, but they also at that point left the topic. I was kind of intrigued reading the beginning of the email. I was like, okay, you think rules have changed? Interesting. You think that it's important to, be adaptable. I agree, right? You're positioning for a story that could really hook someone that you're targeting. But instead, it's a total shift to the pitch. And I feel like this is a challenge that I see a lot of people have. It's not just people who are in sales. It's not people who are marketers. It's not people who are founders. I think everyone that involves touching a customer before they get sold has this issue where there's never a good time to transition between valuable information you're sharing with them and the real reason you're reaching out, which is to start a conversation, to try to get some sort of sales process kicked off. And so you have to figure out, it's like stitching or knitting. Like that's really the point in sales messaging where you really have to fine line it. There's a very peculiar way in any email that you write to start off on a really interesting topic and wiggle your way back smartly into an interesting sales conversation or into an interesting offer. I think what this person did is the right basics. You come in with an interesting topic, and then from there, you will eventually make your way to the pitch, the offer that's going to make them move. But I think in this scenario, they didn't keep that in mind. It was kind of a straight cut, like, hi, here's a story. Okay, now that story is over, I want to tell you about my business, right? And it's very disconnected. So that's the biggest issue that I saw here. And I think that's something that we don't see a lot with, because most people are a little bit too much into assumptions or too much into stories. And I feel like this one is a very basic standard email where it's kind of 2015-esque. They're simply just coming to pitch. They led with an interesting story and then pitch from there.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think somewhere, if you've ever been outbound in some kind of outbound role, you've probably sent an email similar to this. I think, everyone has. It's part of the learning process. And it, some, and maybe not, but I think that I've probably sent an email like this where it's, you give some kind of story and then go right into pitching. And I think, well, the other thing is that, so there's a couple of things in here that may be at play here. Again, I'm just taking shots in the dark about this, but so this is the CEO and co-founder. I'm not sure, did he put that in there to title drop? Probably not. But when you get to the end, right, the calls to action and stuff like that, like the calls to action aren't particularly connected or weighty, but it seems to be like the sender has some semblance that there is weight behind, right? I look forward to hearing back from you. So he follows up the question, instead of just leaving it with, can we schedule a call? This like thanks in advance sort of, I don't know. Executives and leaders are all, they assume that because of the weight of the, they're used to it, right? When they ask a question or send a request, it should be answered because they're in charge, right? And the thing is with prospects is that doesn't exist. You don't have that level of clout with somebody outside your organization or in a sales process. So I don't know. I just saw that structure, and it's just very different than from what than like an SDR would send, right? Most SDRs, I think, would drop that. I look forward to hearing back from you, and would just leave it with an open question. Most outbound prospectors would, I think.
Yeah, I think they overloaded the CTA section. And again, this kind of goes back to earlier in the email. It's kind of a signal of someone who's weaker at copywriting because there's never enough words to use, right? You got to keep it up, because otherwise you might scare them, or you might hurt your reputation or your ego, right?
There's
And so
always
like
more
I
to
think
say.
exactly, and I think in this situation, the two worst things that you could do in a CTA happen. One, and first and foremost, it's buried. I try never to bury in formatting my CTA in an email ever. I want a prospect, if they're in market and see my CTA and it's interesting, most people will glance at the bottom. I want them to find it and be able to read it instantly. So I think it's personally a mistake to ever wedge your CTA in between two unimportant sentences. If they're important, okay, maybe. But otherwise, you really want, it's like a button on a website. You really want that to be there and for them to clearly be able to see it or refer back to it later. And then two, I think the reason why I said that the CTA is weak is because I think that the transition into what would be considered the offer is weak. I mean, to get to the reality, there is no offer here. I think the section where it says, if you think this could be of interest for you, I think that's a big area where a lot of salespeople can really up their game in terms of outreach, because just like I said earlier, right, you got to find a way at the beginning to turn your topic and kind of what you use to intro into why you're reaching out. You got to make that transition into an actual, like, okay, I'm talking about myself and my business now, or why it matters to you, right? Well, there's the same phenomenon happens at the end of the email. You intro with an interesting topic. They're curious, and then they start to learn more about your business. You start to maybe put down some offers, and they're like, but then you actually need to get to the pitch, what exactly you're willing to give them and what exactly the next steps are. I think in this email specifically, the CTA is so vague that really, like, what is the call about? It says, if you think this could be of interest for me, you would love to discuss opportunities that you think I might have in my own space. Can we schedule a call? Like, it's very, I feel like it's very, very vague, and all it does is bring skepticism as they read the CTA. Whereas if they would have taken that line and maybe clarified their offer. So maybe instead of saying, if you think this could be of interest to you, maybe you could say, hey, since I've noticed that you've been hiring team members on your software development team, I would love to show you some of the opportunities, that kind of ties it back to the original reason why you were reaching out, or the original topic that you came for. Another thing that you can do if you can't find information or data like that is to just reinforce your offer. Just say, hey, if you'd enjoy a story of how a company like yours was able to double their output for a software development team in 12 months, I'd love to send over a case study, right? That's another way that you can kind of transition to the CTA without losing them, just because it's either vague or there isn't clear enough next steps to actually get what would be, a C-level person to say, okay, I'll go through with this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of where that's a good point about the CTA, is that if you don't have the incentive, right? Like, what is the incentive? You don't want to cast doubt. Like, that's the thing, is you make some good points about burying it too. There's just so much here where the CTA is vague, but also unconvincing, and it also destroys any potential confidence that someone could have in taking action on it. So, I mean, it's really a recipe for disaster in the CTA department, I think, in not putting it very nicely, but you almost commit every sin you could around calls to action. It will make sure that the very least amount of action, unless somebody's in market and like, oh yes, I would love to outsource software, I will see this and think, okay, these people outsource software, perhaps I can add them to the mix. But there's nothing uniquely compelling about this email CTA combo. So we go into the rewrite here, and Grayson went exactly where I would have gone with using this story and this context and connecting the ideas. He says, "Hi, Austin," or "Good morning, Austin," is what he says. There we go. Good morning, Austin.
I tried to keep the original copy from the top.
Yes. Good morning, Austin. My name is CEO and co-founder of this company. I am reaching out about your development team's roadmap at Viking Cloud this year. 2020 was a year where many game rules were changed, so it's important to stay agile enough to manage product development uninterrupted and without launch delaying hiccups. We help accelerate software development projects for hundreds of clients and I'm hoping to share a few case studies of our experiences in your industry to see if it makes sense to connect further. Can I send those over for your review? So there's a couple of, like, the story is very similar to where I would go. And my story would just be a little bit different, but overall the same, where this is what was missing in the first email. In the top email, if I scroll up there, talks about how 2020 and the game rules change and you got to adjust business plans. Well, I, as the prospect, don't immediately know how your company, like, you don't know my business plans. So you, as the person messaging me, need to help me to understand how are you going to do that in my business specifically? What do you do? And those, you could break down a bunch of different topics or examples and stories of how you helped a company be agile and have success in their business for different reasons, right? And then each of those can be a different email. Like, each of them can be a different story. You could have a collection of case studies about those. You could, you know what I mean? So that this helps paint a concrete picture, or what Keenan calls bridging, right? So you're painting this idea of the future state of, like, 2020 caused this problem and the people that succeeded were people like this. If you're back in the 2020 problem state, the future state is being agile and adjusting your business and your software and building features as the market changes, or whatever it is, right? It could be features, or like you said in there, you talked about launch delaying hiccups. So where you want to launch something, but there were a lot of those. Actually, there was a lot of big companies that delayed launches because of the COVID-19 pandemic, right? We saw it in esports and gaming industries. We saw it in, I believe Microsoft had delays. So there was a lot of things delaying the launch of production software as a result. And if you had more development, maybe you could have actually launched when you said it was. So, I mean, there's a ton of stories to be told there, but the prospect doesn't have that context. You do have to spell it out for them. You have it in your brain when you send the email, but the recipient does not have it in theirs when they read it, unless you put it in there.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's what I tried to do here, honestly, is I tried to keep as much of the structure of the old email as possible and just try to trim it up, make it shorter. And like you said, try to change the wording and the way that the original writer was talking about things to really dig at the heart of the issues. Because like I said earlier, right, like, growing and being stronger is not necessarily a vision that any decision maker is going to be like, oh yes, let's do it, right? Like, you need more clarity. And so I think by simply taking what we saw earlier and just condensing it down to what's most important, while also trying to focus on some specific topics, then exactly like Austin said, even if this email doesn't work, you can test new terminology or a new topic entirely, or test this email with a different persona or a different industry of companies that hire development teams, right? As soon as you get this one kind of email idea formed, then you can do all the testing in the world to figure out what you can do with it and what it means. But I think it's very important, like Austin just said, to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed as you're building an email, almost as if it's a template. I think when you're building emails like this, you want to build it so that ideally, when you have a rep that's new and confused, or you have somebody that has come across this target segment for the first time, you can say, hey, here are some messaging and some topics and some ideas and some angles that you can easily rely on to help get an edge in starting a conversation. And that's how I treat any email I write. I mean, when I'm reaching out to people, I really want to feel like my reputation is going to be safe at the end. Like, forget about like a sales conversation. You can always find a sales call. You can always find a sales opportunity. But I want to make sure that I'm talking to people in a way that makes them feel like they're getting value, that makes them feel like they're enjoying the process. And I think if you pay attention to prospects in that way, you realize this tends to be how they want the writing. They want it to be much shorter. They want it to be really, really inflammatory on the things that they actually care about. Like Austin said, he is in the gaming industry, and my phrasing was able to inflame his specific experience with launch delaying hiccups, right? So it's like, it's this type of copywriting skill that you can apply to the same sort of structure, the same sort of email that we had above. And by just having certain words and certain focuses in the right area, you're really going to drum up more momentum, and you're going to urge people to respond a lot more than having a very long email with an unclear CTA.
And if you look at and that's the thing is, so I like what you said about a template. What I think people should do is build an idea template. I mean, you want to make sure that, you could probably build out 4 or 5 idea templates. Like when I say idea templates, I mean, like where does the email start? Where does the idea go? What is the story being told? And how will it drive the call to action at the end? Because all of those things should connect and be related. And so, the flow of ideas for this rewrite could be applied to a different type of company in a different industry doing completely different things. But how the idea moves throughout the writing doesn't change. You can just plug in different parts, and that once you find emails that are really well constructed and well written and the ideas are all flowing together, you could build a library of those and then be able to pivot into different industries or different different verticals with completely different products, and it will still convert well, just because, again, it's the writing is good, the ideas are good. This doesn't just work for this email formula doesn't just work for development teams.
Yeah. And I think also putting things in the concept of a template also gives you the ability to kind of see as a team or as a department, like where potential gaps might be in your email messaging. So for instance, right, like I try to limit myself, and I don't just like totally personalize and blast out an email that looks nothing like the original. I really define myself to the structure and the phrasing and the way that the original email was going. But if I had to pick something to kind of nitpick at my own email, I would say the intro is the weakest. It's an opt-out, right? I'm reaching out about your development team's roadmap. Like, who gives you permission? Why should I care that you're reaching out, right? Like, you can get a template down, and then all of a sudden, through either a leader or through just a peer review, you can start finding these holes and saying, oh, wow, you're right. Like, how many prospects will actually tell us about their development roadmap when we ask them? Oh, they don't. Well, maybe we need to find a different way to get on the topic of their development roadmap, or scratch the roadmap idea entirely. Maybe since we're talking about uninterrupted product development and talking about launch delaying hiccups, right, which is all about time and speed, maybe focus the intro on something related to the speed or the delays of development. There's so many ways to do it, but by getting it on paper and templated to where everyone can kind of share their thoughts, you're able to really aggregate a lot of interesting knowledge from the team that can show, like, without any data, it can just show clear, common sense things to implement or to improve before you ship the message to a prospect.
Yeah, I know why you kept the first line about CEO and co-founder or whatever, because that was the line used by the original email. But I think you'd probably remove this, I'm reaching out about your development team's roadmap, entirely from the email, and it would still read fine. Like, if I do this, you just go right into the story, right? But
that's an important topic. So with the time we have left, I think the risk of doing that is the giving up of that first transition we talked about. Whereas, what I mean is, if you were to delete that intro line, you would be skipping straight into your story without really giving them a reason why you're reaching out. So it's almost like backwards. They're like, oh, this story is interesting, but who are you and why are you telling me it, right? And then they have to piece together as they're reading, what game rules? Is it talking about marketing? Is it talking about, and then they'll find out as they read that it's talking about product development. So that's always a challenge that you have to have, or that you have to look at, is what order do you want your prospect absorbing information? Usually you have to quickly, whenever you're getting the intro of a story in, you have to make it relevant to them or you. Or if you're trying to introduce yourself and the reason why you're reaching out, you'll generally have to quickly transition into some sort of story or some information about them that's going to keep them interested.
Nice. Oh, well, I am set on this email. I don't know if you have anything else to say about it.
No, I don't think so. I think the big takeaway that I've been seeing across, I'd say probably a few months of our episodes, is everyone across the board tends to have weak sauce, future state, and pain point keywords. We're seeing a lot of help you grow, help your business run better, help you drive more revenue, help save time, like all these very vague pain points and benefits that I feel like you learn how to implement basic ones like that when you're first getting into a sales career. But I guess that would be like my ending predictions for this episode. Is I'm getting the gist that is going to get saturated more so than it already has. Prospects are really going to be hawking and looking for sellers who actually know what they're talking about. And how do you know what they're talking about? It's how they speak, how they carry the sales process, and then what terminology they use, the language that they use to talk to their prospects. So it'll be interesting in the coming months. We'll see if maybe this gets better or worse as we kind of review more emails throughout the year.
Yeah, it's Q4. I'm surprised. I've actually had fewer prospecting emails in Q3. I would think for sure, because we're a middle, we're an emerging enterprise company. We're not huge, but we're not small. People love to sell us mid-market 50 to 60K ACV products, 20 to 60K ACV SaaS, and sales cycle for those is what, 30 to 90 days, depending on how complicated it is. So I just wonder, I'm just like, why am I not getting more prospecting emails right now for the big Q4 push? So I don't know. Because then everyone starts going on holiday in Q4 in the United States anyway. It'll be interesting to see. You're right. There are tons of vague benefit keywords. If I would be making mountains of money spending 0 time per day if I bought all of the empty promises in those prospecting emails.
Infinite growth
with no effort and no head count. That it's true. Every time someone promises me to save me money, save me effort, save me time, with all this time, money, and effort I'm saving, I'm going to sit on a beach and just print money. And that's a good point, is that if you need to, I think that's a good exercise to do as an AE or as an SDR. Go and find your vague promises. They may not be that generic, right? They may not be as generic. We'll save you time and money, but even the ones that are like kind of clued in, like we help if you're a marketing or a product management SaaS or something, we help your development cycle run more efficiently and something like that. It sounds contextual, but it's very vague. It sounds like, oh, that's tailored just for product managers. Yeah, because hypothetically only product managers care about the development cycle, but it's still really vague. Go in there and replace it and find some specific benefit that you can put it in. And I think you probably see an immediate benefit, an immediate increase in responses at the very least, because people at least understand what you're saying.
Yeah, I love it. To kind of add on top of that too. Man, I just forgot what you were talking about. It left.
Product managers, development cycle, vague promises, make them
vague promises. Yeah. So on benefits, right? Like if for those who are watching and maybe like, you say, oh, I don't have generic promises, or oh, my benefits are pretty good. Well, that's good. Like, that's great. Go about it, like Austin said, but in a different way. Instead of reviewing all of your promises or all of your benefits or whatever to try to improve them because they're bad, use it for testing. I think I do that regularly on a quarterly basis. I think just naturally, like whether it's on like automated outreach or, manual handwritten emails, I'll kind of A/B test the way that I speak about every part of my sales process just naturally, because like why I feel almost as if I'm missing opportunities if I stick with the same language forever. Because what opportunities could I be closing, or what conversations could I be starting if I just adjusted this or adjusted this? So I think for any AEs or SDRs out there who feel confident in the way that they're positioning benefits or pain points, I would say take it to the next level. Start creating your own testing process so that you can really crack the puzzle.
I think that is a great note to end on. So if you want to watch more awesome content like this, mash the like button on YouTube so that you can see more of our videos and more people see it. Subscribe. Go to SC Revolution's website and Slack channel because we're in there. It's growing. We put stuff like this out all the time. Other content with other outbound experts. You guys have had Kyle Coleman and a bunch of other people, other big sales influencers. So there's lots of good stuff there. And as always, we will be here 11:30 a.m. Eastern time on Mondays next week and every week forever until I die.
Signing off.